Hello and welcome back to Bottomless Coffee. My name is Jerome Evans, and on this show we have conversations with people who are having a positive impact on the world around them. And we have those conversations over coffee or tea or hot water, cold water on a day like today. Honestly, as long as the conversation is good, the guests can drink whatever they want. Today we are talking with Todd Barnes, creator of Equity News Network and author of Deconstruction Zone. Welcome, Todd. How are you?
I'm terrific, and it's really just good to be here with you. I'm just so happy to be in the midst of Bottomless Cup with endless conversation. Yeah.
That's exactly the vibe. That's exactly the vibe. Well, can you tell us a little bit about ENN?
Yeah, Equity News Network was born in 2020, so it's a couple years old. It's still a baby. And we started with something called Together TV. And that was something we threw together as we were actually learning video production. My background comes a little bit from television, having a show on Care 11 for 2 years, and hosting a public affairs show on KSTP Channel 5 for the Twin Cities Urban League. And so I had on camera and in front of the camera experience, but no behind the camera experience. And so we just put together something called Together TV to learn the actual video production aspects. And then we were very fortunate to, through the Minnesota Department of Health, get an opportunity to encourage people to get the COVID-19 vaccines and booster shots as a part of our show, as a real foundational piece of our show. And so we continue with that messaging today with a show that's been for the last year and a half now called LGBT, Healthcare and Me. Okay. And because that is such a mouthful,
but it rhymes.
It does. It does. We're rebranding it to alphabetpeople.news.
Okay.
And so,
cute.
Yeah. And so that's where we're at. That's how it came to be, and that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Now you're gonna be testing my memory here because there was a lot that you just shared with us. But I'm hearing that you were in front of the camera for quite some time. You didn't have any experience behind the camera. And I'm also kind of hearing that there was something missing in the media landscape that you really thought you could bring to the table. And because it's Equity News Network, I'm going to assume that equity is what you were missing. Is that a good guess or a bad guess?
Well, being Jerome T. Evans, it's spot on. You know, it's just such a great question. And when I grew up, there were 3 major TV networks, national networks, and then we had our local television stations. And my dream was always to be a television anchor, probably because I craved attention. I loved journalism. I'm a curious person. And really it was the only game in town. And so the issue that I ran into, the challenge that I ran into as a young person is, back when I was growing up, there was a prototype of a news anchor, and that was a white male or a white female who had a family and a nice picture to put on the little desk. And they had to project an image that the station wanted projected. And since you couldn't say or breathe the word gay, being openly gay and going into journalism or any kind of public role in that regard wasn't as possible as it is today. And so Equity News Network to me means it's just simply another word for reparations. It means that, at least to me, if you're a part of any kind of disenfranchised group traditionally, then it's our opportunity and invitation and responsibility to claim what's ours. Okay. And usually that has something to do with our gifts, our talents, our abilities, and our skills. And since I was born to be an anchor man, I have then gone back and said, society, you don't get to have the last word on what I get to do in terms of being on this earth. I'm going to have the last word. The God I worship is going to have the last word. And so the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And that's how Equity News, that's what it means to me, is reparations.
There is clearly a lot of passion behind what you're doing, and it's interesting because you and I, we exist at this intersection of the LGBTQ community and the Black community. And very frequently, I find that in the Black community, we're taught that we have to make our own path. And so I wonder if there's anything in your experience as a Black man that made you feel empowered to create a whole news network, centered around equity and reparations and really whatever it is that you think reflects our community. Are there stories from your childhood that you can share that make you think, oh, okay, like for me, I was one of those millennial kids where the teacher's like, you can be anything you want, you can do anything. And I grew up in Atlanta, where, it's a majority Black city. And so, but until I moved to Minnesota, I honestly thought that everywhere is like Atlanta. Black people are everywhere. And so there have been some surprises along the way. But what from your childhood or from your experiences lent you the strength or that sense of empowerment?
Well, I would just say that you're fortunate because you, it doesn't sound like grew up on a plantation.
No.
Like we did up here. Usually we associate plantations with the South and freedom with the North. But the reality is so much of life for African Americans, it seems like, is plantation-based up here and freedom-based down there. And so I was given up for adoption at birth down in Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abraham Lincoln. And then I was put up in a foster home in East St. Louis. And then I was adopted at the age of 6 months old by a Presbyterian minister and his white wife. They were both white. And so as a mixed racial child, growing up in these small towns in Illinois and Wisconsin and Michigan, bedroom communities, and having my dad be a Presbyterian minister, when you're a minister in small towns, you're part of the first family of the community.
Yes.
And so that's how we were treated always, as part of the first family. So I didn't know any different. And then I had a dad who gave me the Jerome T. Evans Atlanta treatment in terms of mind. You can be anything you want. Fast forward to when I was 18 years old and you leave the protection of white mommy and daddy and you get put out into the real world. The real world says, we don't give a damn where you grew up. Yep. We don't know your story and don't really want to know your story. We see the color of your skin. We see who you are. You're going to just be put over here. This is where you can do. And so in Minnesota, usually that is immediately upon high school graduation, go ahead and apply for food stamps, get your stamps, get on some kind of assistance program, sign up for Section 8, and then move on a path of government assistance. That's too often what's happening up here in the northern part of the Twin Cities, which is why we're last in education and last in employment and why we had George Floyd, the incident here, which just isn't talked about. And so my passion comes from being raised in a white community to see how white folks live with a can-do attitude and an expansive mind that is not trauma-based, but comes from the privilege that they have. And so all I've done is said, wait a minute, that's not yours.
Yeah.
That's ours. And when I say what's yours or ours, I'm just simply meaning God-given opportunity and freedom that this country gives us. And that should be given to anybody, regardless of skin color, sexual preference, gender, religion, and any label that you want to fix on people. And so all I believe that my responsibility to do is create a news network, but more importantly, walk in any room with my head held high, even when I feel like a piece of crap, even when I feel like I want to sit in my trauma, even when I want to sit in my story or in my past. Yeah. It's just to get up each day and see what's possible and seize that and be a role model for that.
Now, I'm hearing, I mentioned on the last episode, I've read one whole book on trauma, and I'm hearing some things, like sitting in your story, sitting in your trauma. Do you find, or I should ask a more open-ended question, when it comes to the programs that you're putting on ENN, the stories that you're covering, are you centering healing, or is it healing and other things, or maybe just tell us about what we'll find when we turn to ENN?
Well, first of all, our show rebranded now as alphabetpeople.news on our YouTube channel Equity News Network,
Gotcha.
really serves what I consider a meal. And the Minnesota Department of Health provides the funding for the vegetables of that meal.
Okay.
And the vegetables of the meal are COVID-19, encouraging folks to get that vaccine and that booster shot. And so we do that vigorously. But the problem is that you cannot, at least in my opinion, create a successful podcast or broadcast with just vegetables or spinach. You have to have a main course and dessert. And so we just surround that vegetable or that spinach with the meat and dessert, which is health-related headlines as it relates to the LGBTQ community. And then we have a pink power panel, which are members of the LGBT community that weigh in on the important critical issues of the day. And then any kind of human interest stories that either are COVID or non-COVID related, but always in some regard LGBTQ and or African American related.
Now, when you talk about the programming that you did relating to COVID specifically, and that being the vegetable, was that more just like, here is a list of where you can get your vaccine, or is it more like a PSA? You know?
Well, what we do is it's been very consistent where we're interviewing actual employee or team member from the Minnesota Department of Health. So we're getting the information from the horse's mouth, not to call MDH.
Certainly.
And so really we're just allowing MDH to come through us as a trusted community health presenter to present the information and hopefully have it be a bit more impactful because it might be coming from somebody that folks are used to seeing around.
Did your Pink Power panel ever talk about the vaccines?
Oh yeah, on many shows we incorporate the vaccine. We incorporate the feelings, the attitudes of others as it relates to COVID vaccines, and we often ask the Pink Power panel members, what are you hearing on the street? What are you hearing about it? You know, that's where we get most of our information from, is anecdotally what we're hearing in our community about these vaccine and booster shots. So we ask them about that, and this next episode, the whole question of the show is surrounded about how has your life changed since COVID? And so that definitely has something to do with booster shots and vaccines, as we know, because sometimes it's life and death. So that's how it kind of plays itself out on our show.
That's the veggies. The meat, and I've only seen 1 or 2 episodes so far, but they are streaming.
Thank you. Yeah.
Had to do with body image in the LGBTQ community. And I thought it was really fascinating because it's one of those things that it stuck with me, right? So very well done.
Thank you so much.
I was going to Florida in like a week or so. And I watched your show and I was like, well, this doesn't really have anything to do with me. Like, it's talking to me, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. But I'm going to Florida, and so I'd better go to the gym and hit it really hard for like this couple of days because I'm gonna go see my friends in a bathing suit. And I was walking through the gym and I was like, oh my God. I have a body image issue, but had never really considered it in that light. And I thought that was just really fascinating to have a show talking seriously about this topic because, like you said, I'm not gonna hear it anywhere else. We're not going to get it on the other major networks. It's nuanced and it's personal. And I thought you would appreciate hearing that little, almost like an aha moment. I think Oprah might have that trademark, so I don't know if I'm allowed to call it that. But
There's nothing that's more meaningful, at least to me, or means as much to me as when people say that it touched them in some way or that they learned something. And a lot of times it's interesting that I hear that from heterosexual people. We, as an example, one episode, we gave definitions of what the 48 or 64 different gender definitions are. And LGBT folks and heterosexual people didn't know what those definitions were and what they all meant and all these acronyms and alphabets. And so anyway, thank you for the nice compliment.
So what other topics, meaty topics, have you covered? And how will those surprise me on my way to work?
Well, what we try to do is cover topics that are not centered on sexualizing the LGBT community. There is so much in the LGBT community that is either all based, it seems to me, around, at least in media portrayal is what I'm talking about, which is either sex or body image. That what we're trying to do is give you, first of all, headlines that are affecting the LGBT community. Second of all, drilling down on people, organizations that, just like you are doing here on Bottomless Cup, hopefully folks that are positively impacting the community. So as you'll see on our next show, we are interviewing Kevin Stocks, who's the executive director of the Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus. So we're able to interview Kevin, learn about where he's from and his history, what he's bringing to the community, and then also integrate the music of the Gay Men's Chorus into the entire show.
Oh, fascinating.
So those are kind of some of the things that you'll see. And the biggest thing that we try to do, I might add, is we try to maintain journalistic integrity. So in a sea of broadcasts and podcasts where people are popping off and where the name of the game is to get as many clicks as possible by saying the most outrageous.
Get the hot take.
Get the hot take. Get the viral moment. What we try to do and what we have done is present a show that we try to have as polished, as sticking to journalistic standards. So you're not going to get the side eyes, the smirks, the comments after we deliver a news story. You're not going to know how this host feels about any particular story, usually.
You don't editorialize.
I don't editorialize. And the passion that you're seeing right now from personal Todd is not shown on the show as much. It's a much more straightforward presentation of facts and community information. So that's what that's what we try to do as well.
Now, something that jumped out to me for ENN, interviewing the Gay Men's Chorus. Have you already had that conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you stick them on the name Gay Men's Chorus in the community, or?
You're bringing up
Like from a journalistic perspective.
Which is why
no spoilers. I'm sorry.
No, which is why you're successful and why your show does so well. You're just asking a really tough and important question around gender, around how we talk about each other, label each other, and especially what we affix to our organizational names. The Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus has been the Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus for 40 years now. They're just celebrating their 40th year anniversary. And this is an organization that I'm gathering likes and wants to keep their name because they haven't done anything else. And so journalistically, I did not ask them about that. I do think it's an interesting question in terms of how, not just the name, but I'd be as interested in who gets to be in the choir.
Yeah.
I mean, is it only people who identify or self-identify as males?
What if I'm a bi man? Yeah.
What if I'm a bi man? What if I'm trans? How does that work? Or can I be that and still be in the Gay Men's Chorus? Can it still be, what Deconstruction Zone is about, which is a book I've just written, which I know we'll talk about
No, no
we
time
we
like
try to get away from labels, and so I didn't ask the question about the Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus, but personally, as a mixed racial, gay, adopted, former foster kid, crackhead, alcoholic, church board member. I mean, which label do I need to wear today, and really who am I, and does it really matter, and which one of those hats am I supposed to wear, and which one are you comfortable with me wearing today, and which one am my character comfortable with today? So I don't know. I was asked the other day to please separate groups that were facilitating self-worth circles between males and females. And I looked at the person and I said, well, first of all, that still is antiquated because we have we have more than now people who identify than just male or female. But secondly, no, I don't want any kind of separation between because I'm tired of the separation. We need to learn how to work together and be together. This is the United States of America. It's an experiment. And the experimentation is that we are going to get folks in a room that do not like each other, do not know each other, know nothing about each other, are not from the same place, don't have the same cultures, mores, traditions, and you're going to get along. You're going to live together, and you're going to do some great things together. That's our mandate as a nation.
Better come through, Todd. You were serving some rich meat to go along with our coffee here on Bottomless Coffee. Let's take a coffee break.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with more from Todd Barnes from Equity News Network. Well, welcome back to Bottomless Coffee with Jerome. We are talking with Todd Barnes from ENN. Okay, a whole network, Equity News Network. That's such an incredible undertaking. Can you walk us through more of your professional journey, and then we'll dive back into more of the types of programming that we'll see on ENN.
Yeah, my professional journey has been one where at the age of I went to Minneapolis Community and Technical College, where I was the student president for 2 years, and then student president of all 29 community colleges in the state of Minnesota.
Oh my gosh.
And then that was back in 1989. So then I became a waiter, and I worked on the Van Wyck city council campaign. He was Minneapolis's first city council member from back in the 1970s. And
he was the Minneapolis's
first black city council member, and only for decades. So
Wow.
he was a powerhouse, and the old school type of alderman, Chicago type of alderman, and city council member. And so I worked on his campaign, and then I was a waiter, and there was a young upstart who ran, a white lady, a blonde lady. Her name was Jackie Cherry Holmes, and she ran against this longtime council member and beat him. And that's the campaign that I worked on. While I was a waiter, she walked in the restaurant.
Oh, okay.
And so I said, "Whoa, Council Member Cherry Holmes, I worked on your opponent's campaign," and we got to talking, and I happened to be her waiter. And she came back to the restaurant the next day. She said, "Can I talk to you?" I was like, "Whoa!" And she's like, "I'm looking for an assistant."
Really?
Right. And so you can imagine at age 23, the experience that this was with this lady who had just beat this high-profile city council member, coming in and asking this young guy this question. And so I interviewed for the job, and she put another gentleman by the name of Brett McNeil in that position. I didn't get the job, but they put me in Brett McNeil's old position. He was the community organizer in the Minneapolis public housing neighborhood, Sumner Olson.
Okay.
So I started out my career 23 years old as the community organizer in the public housing neighborhood in North Minneapolis.
Wow.
So 3 years after that, I became the executive director of an organization that city council member, and then soon to be president, Jackie Cherry Holmes, created. And she brought together 15 different youth organizations and had an association called Club Fed. And I became the executive director of Club Fed at age 26 years old, where we went from 15 agencies to 80 North and South Minneapolis agencies as a collaboration, putting on after-school, summer enrichment programming. And then I became the communications and community relations director for the Urban League. I had my own show on KARE 11. I was assistant to 2 Minneapolis mayors, Mayor R.T. Ryback and Mayor Don Frazier. And then assistant to City Council member Natalie Johnson-Lee, who ended up beating Jackie Cherry Holmes.
Oh. Okay.
Right. So Van White, Jackie, and then Natalie.
Yes.
All three, bing, bang, boom. So that's my history. And I've taken my experience then working in human service agencies, like the marketing director for the African American AIDS Task Force, and my background in government and background in communications, and parlayed it into something that I am trying to emulate after the late Roger Ailes of Fox News.
Oh.
Now you're thinking, what is this black, gay, whoa, did he just say Roger Ailes and Fox News?
You read my mind.
I did. Roger Ailes was one of the most masterful political consultants of his time, of course, starting with Richard Nixon, and then he goes on to be a consultant for Ronald Reagan, and then Rupert Murdoch plucks him to start this upstart network that didn't have a chance against the existing CNN and the broadcast news networks. Yeah. Well, Roger took this and in a storefront studio, of course that was financed by Rupert, so it was in an office tower, but it was down on the bottom floor, and they didn't have anything but boxes and startup materials, and he took that from a teeny little startup to what Fox News is today. Wow. And so all I'm saying is we need an alternative to the Roger Ailes and the Fox Newses, and that LGBTQ and African American and other voices can aspire to big things. And so that's where it comes from. So right now we have one show. And so you're thinking, well, how can you call yourself a network and you have one show? Well, everything starts with something.
Exactly.
And the way I believe, which cuts across everything I do, if you do something well, it always grows. It always turns into something. I've never, ever met a person in my life who said, I worked my ass off, I got up every day, I did what I needed to do, and I didn't achieve my dream. I've never met those people. I've met a lot of people who say, I can't achieve my dream. I've met a lot of people who say, I haven't achieved my dream, or she's not, or they're not letting me achieve my dream, or here are the barriers to achieving my dream, but not, I dreamed big, I did what I was supposed to do, I worked my ass off, and
Yeah.
So that's where it comes from.
Now, you were referring to Fox News,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm missing the word. Did you say alternative to, or did you say opposed to?
No, I would never say opposed to, alternative to. We need a plethora, as many voices in America to come forward as possible. Those are conservative voices. Those are liberal voices. Those are people who believe in abortion and who are against abortion. There are black voices and there are white voices. There are Ku Klux Klan voices and they are Black Lives Matter voices. They're voices. They're people. They're humans. And so I don't believe in quashing anybody's voice or being opposing anybody's voice so much as my mission, as much as adding a voice.
Okay, so then maybe I can ask you another one of those questions. How do you feel about quote unquote platforming or allowing people onto your network who maybe have, let's say, whatever, oppressive, like the opposite of equity, right?
Yeah.
It's oppression. Yeah. Views that are more aligned with oppression than inequity. those are people you would allow onto the network?
Absolutely. That's what the network should be for. We want to transform lives and change minds, not preach to the choir. How boring to get up and talk to people who agree with you. That, to me, is just absolutely a boring notion. I want to mix it up. And I also like good television. And good television comes with controversy. It doesn't come with kumbaya moments all day. And so, let's be real.
That's true.
And so absolutely, any day somebody from the Ku Klux Klan wants to come and talk to me, we will have a hell of a conversation for a half hour, an hour, as long as they want. Come on and bring it. And I believe that if you are confident in yourself and your own views, you should not have a problem with anybody whose voice is spouting off,
Well, then let me go back a little bit to something we were talking about earlier with regard to your journalistic standards and not bringing yourself into that interview or that conversation. I get, probably one of my big reasons for not letting people whose views I categorically disagree with not sit in that chair is that I'm like, I wouldn't be able. I don't need what I say to those people to be caught on camera. So how would you walk that line between the professional journalist and the person who so vehemently disagrees with those views?
Well, I think, really how one conducts themselves is very different as an interviewer than as an interviewee. It's the difference between what you're doing today and what I'm doing today. As an interviewee, I'm able to express myself in certain ways and albeit flamboyant, creative, louder, more animated than a host might, who's really trying to be responsible to their audience in terms of objectivity and trying to figure out what the audience would like to hear about. Whereas the interviewee has a little bit more latitude. How I would handle it on my own, though, is when you have a network, you're able to put on different shows. And so you're able to apply different standards to different shows. The standard we have right now on our existing show, which is now alphabetpeople.news, is we maintain the highest of journalistic standards. It is developed as a newscast. But if a KKK person came on, maybe I put that out as an ENN special. It's a news network, so I can do anything I want, how I want, in any format I want, either on a website, streaming, or in any distribution or creative format that I want. And so that's how I'd handle it.
This is really interesting, and I think this is a type of conversation that people don't usually hear. Because typically the host and the producer aren't being interviewed at the same time, right? But you're like, sure, I can have them on this one show, but as the producer and creator of the network, I can, I'm gonna use the word oppose, but I can oppose that viewpoint for 23 hours of the day and just have that one guest on for 1 hour of the day. And I think that's a fascinating way to approach it. And maybe that's what Roger Ailes did. Maybe he would invite, Democrats onto Fox News for a 20-minute segment and then spend the rest of the hour talking about how they didn't know what they were talking about. He would do
20 seconds.
Yes.
20 seconds of an hour as from a Democrat perspective, and the regular 58 minutes and 40 seconds or whatever on conservative. But he developed something called niche programming, which meant that he took a segment of the market and said, I'm just gonna market to them, and I'm going to feed them what they want to hear, what I think they want to hear. And he did that masterfully. That's not what I'm about. That's not what we do. I'm not pushing an agenda, a thought agenda. I'm wanting you to think. I don't want to tell you what to think. And so everything we do is trying to get you to think, not tell you what to think. We don't have an agenda, an ideology based on gender, race, or sexual preference, even though our network is based on race, gender, and sexual preference. And so it's kind of juxtaposed. And I think that's our magic. And I think that our voice is special that way, because we're not coming out with the same stories or the same orthodoxy or the same perspective or the same origination of feelings or storytelling around those issues.
I am so fascinated. And I am curious, you've got one show now. I don't know what you've got in the pipeline, but if you're able to share some of those, I'd love to hear it. And then your vision for a show, maybe let's say the perfect show on ENN. If you're able to share.
Well, how I envision is that ENN will partner with other networks, and other networks do a fantastic job of what ENN does not do, or what ENN has not developed yet, which is distribution. And so all we're wanting to do is to partner with incredible networks like MCN Channel 6 to be able to get our product out to more and more of an audience. And so if we can find platforms like this, or platforms like traditional TV stations or cable networks, or broadcast networks, what we're doing is trying to get our show to the quality and level to be able to go to those networks and pitch our show, to make sure that we have an equal partnership in advertising revenue, and we have the ability to use maybe some of their equipment for our technical needs, and then build an enterprise around covering LGBT and African American issues from this perspective on other networks is all. That's our plan.
So you're probably not limiting the type of show by like format. So you could have a talk show on ENN like you already do. You could have a cooking show if you wanted to. You could have like a, I don't know, MTV countdown show or what have you.
Anything.
If you wanted to, so long as it aligned with the mission of the network.
Now, networks tend to be based on advertising. Our revenue comes from advertising. And so our shows are often dictated by advertising. And so when you, now in this new economy, if you want to put together a show, you might find an anchor sponsor is what I'd call, like Minnesota Department of Health. And then they are telling you what a lot of the show needs to be about. And so you're taking your capabilities, your interest areas, your mission, and you're wrapping it around that sponsorship opportunity and creating a show from it. And that's the new economy. That's where you have to go. And so if General Mills, which is one of our great companies here in Minnesota, comes and we develop a partnership with General Mills, you're going to see the best cooking show on. And we're going to make sure that we talk about Yoplait yogurt as much as we talk about COVID-19 vaccine now, because we have to keep our network running. The only criteria is that we believe in the product or the message that we're hawking. And we believe strongly in encouraging people to get the COVID-19 vaccine and booster shot. And so we might not believe as strongly in Yoplait yogurt. Sorry, General Mills, but
well, you have to find the right host. You have to find someone who's really passionate about it.
Yes, that's right. But that's really kind of what I envision in terms of the network, is building partnerships with corporations.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you some feedback there, because you definitely want to do partnerships with corporations, but what someone told me is that you can't forget community either. And I think if you build that same partnership with community, then you'll also have that audience that the corporations are always hungry for, right? And you can maybe you two working together, the network and the community.
Well, I guess I thought one is a prerequisite. Like the only reason you're on, the only reason you have a chair, the only reason one has a platform is that connection with the community. So all we're doing is leveraging that community connection with a corporation or with an organization or somebody that's going to pay for it. And unfortunately, the community, we have the relationship, but they can't pay for it. And so we take that relationship and we leverage it.
So what is the relationship that you have with community look like now, the ENN community relationship? Feedback mechanisms or like?
Yes, well, you know, the great thing is having the Pink Power Panel and being able to have now a close-knit group of what has been for the last year and a half the Pink Power panel of 3 self-identified gay men and 1 self-identified lesbian to bring us access to their friend network, their family network, the information that they're getting from those family and friends, and expanded community networks from the neighborhoods in which they live and the organizations of which they're a part. But most of all, what I've got at least in terms of that connection to community then is learning up front and personal about what it means to be a confident LGBTQ person. Because I'm listening to the stories that Joe and Monsace, who are 2 married men on our show, we get to hear stories of their marriage, of their honeymoon, of how they met, of what they do together, of now they're buying a house together. Trishan tells us stories about what it's like to be a female and her perspective. And then, of course, we have Wendell Ward, who... So those are just examples of connection to community. We also have a big partnership with High School for Recording Arts. And so that puts us 4 days a week right in the middle of the African American community. And then at High School for Recording Arts, our partnership is with the Check Yourself Health and Wellness Center, which does all the HIV and STD prevention and awareness work. They are the premier HIV and STD prevention and awareness youth group for the last 25 years in the Twin Cities. So getting the LGBT young people from that program, as well as the students in the high school, and being at the epicenter of the African American community, I couldn't be more grateful. And that's after 40 years of growing up at the community, in this community, 20 years of being the town drunk at the saloon downtown. Oh. So I have my bona fides, if you will.
I was, I could tell the question kind of took you back a little bit, but from the way you're describing it, it's, community is integrated in the show. The show is community.
It's community.
Almost like, Jerome, describe your arm to me. Just look at it. Just watch the show. You will see community.
Yeah.
The Pink Power panel in particular, is that rotating? Or is it always the same couple of folks?
It's always the same people.
I love that.
We'll have some guests on there. We've had 1 guest on there before because somebody couldn't make it. But other than that, for the year and a half, it's been this exact same crew, the same ones. They've not left. They've stuck with us. And I'm so proud of them. And that's what really the people, our audience likes the best. That's where we get the most feedback. That's what generates the stories, is the Pink Power panel and their opinions and what they say about body image and their substance usage or non-usage or how they're going through COVID, not the host. Mm-hmm. That's the magic of the show, is it is about the community. The host is just somebody that weaves the stories through. But this is a real story, or a real show, I think, that it just puts community up in front.
I love that. Well, I want to ask you about your book, Deconstruction Zone, but we're going to take a coffee break. Be right back with Todd Barnes from E&N. Welcome back to Bottomless Coffee with Jerome. We are here with Todd Barnes from Equity News Network and author of the book, Deconstruction Zone. And for just a few minutes, I'm going to ask you as many questions as I can in the time that's allowed. First off, can you just tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, the book was written, co-written with my godson, Louis Blaze. And Louis Blaze, or Louis McCaleb, his God-given name, is a really well-known young rap artist in the Twin Cities. He's also my godson. And so we took 5 years, and we took the different parts of a computer, and we just correlated it to the human existence, and we wrote a book from it based on the fruits of the Spirit in the Bible and the different components of a computer. So that's kind of how we wrote the book, all based on self-worth.
Okay. So it's losing your psychic pounds, rebooting who you are. So I get the computer reference in rebooting. Can you tell me about my psychic pounds?
Sure.
Am I psychically obese?
You know, that's the question of the hour for each of us. Am I psychically obese? Am I carrying psychic pounds or additional weight on my shoulders that does not need to be there, that is hindering me from climbing up the mountain and standing on top of it to wherever I want to go? And so psychic pounds is just a metaphor for the boulders on our back that weigh us down.
I think a lot of people are probably have a list of boulders weighing them down, running through their minds right now. Obviously, COVID-19, right now, monkeypox, which is a whole nother thing. You know, our friends, our families, flight delays, the whole nine.
Keep going.
What are some of the ones that you describe in your book, if it's
You know, we provide 2 pages of a list of potential psychic pounds, and they run the gambit, just like you're saying, everything from late rent payments to they won't let me, he said no, I can't. It's anything that's keeping you from not doing what you want to do. And so that could be divorce, it could be a breakup, it could be a separation, it could be death, it could be anything that happened in your past that keeps you looking in the rearview mirror instead of looking out the windshield. And so we're just saying, what can we get into the rearview mirror, which needs to go there, and what can we get in the windshield that needs to go there?
Can you speak more to the collaboration between yourself and your godson? You said it took 5 years.
It did. It took 5 years. Yes, we...
Whose idea was it?
Well, we started with 7 people. And it wasn't a book at first, it was a chart. And we just made a chart. And then suddenly, 2 years after we made this chart, based again on the computer and the human development correlation, we realized that the chart was a book, that we couldn't do anything with the chart, that if you want any kind of platform for the things that you want to get across, you need to put it, a book is a good way. And so we can do things like this.
Yeah.
And so we just put it in a book. And now we have a collaboration with the premier youth organization called The Link, in which they have contracted us to deliver the book is a curriculum around self-worth. And so through the Minnesota Department of Health and through The Link now, we've been contracted for the next 2 years to do self-worth circles in the community for LGBT and African American folks, so that we can get the boulders off our back and go from a trauma-informed lens to a talent-informed lens.
Have you convened one of these circles before?
And so they're starting in the month of August.
Oh, yeah.
They're part of the COVID Community Coordinator Initiative that just is off the ground this month.
Can you give us briefly an idea of what one of those circles would be like?
Yeah. You know, we base everything that has to do with the circles around music, humor, and food.
Oh, I love
And
I
so
love
if
all
you
three of those
come,
things.
you're going to get music, you're going to get humor, and you're going to get food, hopefully. And it's going to be good because we're about quality. At least we endeavor to be.
Yeah.
And now you get to have a COVID vaccine shot or a booster shot if you need one as well. And so that's what you get: music, humor, food, and a vaccine or booster shot.
Party.
It's a party.
I'm into it.
Yeah, 2-year party.
Todd, this has been a beautiful, rich, meaty conversation. We also got some vegetables in. Is there any one message that you want to make sure you get across to the audience at home before we end our conversation today?
Yeah, you know, I just want to encourage every single LGBTQ person, an African American person, don't leave one dream on the table. And then I just want to say thank you to Bottomless Cup and to you for the work that you're doing, for the issues that you're raising, for the platform that you're giving people like me, and the first-class way in which you're doing your work. And so thank you for doing what you do and for allowing us to be a part of it.
Thank you, Todd. That's very kind. Well, I'm Jerome with Bottomless Coffee with Jerome. Find out all about us at bottomlesscoffeeshow.com. That's all we got today, folks. See you next time.